With the Stanley Cup playoffs almost coming to an end, there's been a lot of talk lately about streaks and droughts and teams not winning the Stanley Cup. So today we're going to look at the longest active streaks when it comes to making the playoffs, winning a playoff series, showing up in the Stanley Cup finals, and winning the Stanley Cup. We'll discuss all these most active droughts coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned today, we're taking a look at some of the longest streaks, and they're not good ones, going on in the NHL currently when it comes to playoff hockey and winning the Stanley Cup or even competing for the Stanley Cup. We've probably heard a lot of recent news that the Toronto Maple Leafs have recently set a record for the longest Stanley Cup drought in NHL history. Well, there's been a lot of talk about that, so I was like, you know what, there's a lot of other teams that have some not so good droughts going as well. So we're going to take a look at the longest active droughts when it comes to A, making the playoffs, B, winning a playoff series, C, making it to the Stanley Cup finals, and then lastly, actually winning the Stanley Cup. There's lots of teams that have never even won the Stanley Cup. There's some teams that have never even appeared in a Stanley Cup final. So as much as it might be fun to make fun of certain teams for other fan bases for teams not succeeding, there's plenty of others out there as well that are pretty much here in the same boat. So let's get started here and take a look first up at the longest active playoff droughts. This one might actually come as a little bit of a surprise, and some of it may not. Now, some of the teams that are going to show up at the top of this list probably won't be too much of a surprise given their lack of recent success. So right now, the longest active playoff streak belongs to the Buffalo Sabres, which is 10 consecutive years of not making the Stanley Cup playoffs. So obviously it's been a long time coming for Buffalo. That whole period of time really has kind of felt like a rebuild, and with all the unanswered questions about what they're facing this offseason, there's really no solution in sight, and it's really difficult to say how long this streak is going to continue before they really have a legitimate shot at breaking it. Now, next up, we've got the Detroit Red Wings, who went the opposite route and had a long streak of 20 plus years making the playoffs. Now they're at 5 consecutive years at missing the playoffs. Obviously, the Red Wings, again, are going through a bit of a rebuild, and this is a longer process given where things were at when they started. It's taken a while to get this roster kind of stripped down and start to build back up. So they're probably going to be getting closer to that Buffalo streak by the time they will have a legitimate shot, or at least close to it. It's going to be at least a few more years before Detroit, I think, really has a legit shot of breaking this drought. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators, who last made the playoffs in 2017, went to the Stanley Cup Conference Finals, where it was 1 goal away from playing for the Stanley Cup against Nashville when they lost that double overtime game to Pittsburgh, and they have not been back to the playoffs here ever since. The following season, we saw them start to go through some changes. A lot of it had to do with contract disputes and ownership not wanting to pay certain players. They started the teardown. The Matt Duchene trade happened, and really that trade is kind of responsible, in my opinion, for kind of throwing off the whole team chemistry and really just starting this team down a whole negative area of funk that they seem to be coming out of now, but it's taken a while to get to that point. And I think they're at a point now where they can at least challenge for playoffs. Hard to say if they'll make it in the next year, but probably with the next couple of years for sure, they should be at least a playoff contender. I'm not sure they'll be a cup contender, but at least a playoff contender here in the next year or two, I would think is fair to say. We have 3 teams that are out for 3 consecutive years, and that includes the Anaheim Ducks, the Los Angeles Kings, as well as the New Jersey Devils. Now, in the case of New Jersey and Anaheim, I think they're both going to be a little while getting back in. LA appears to be a little bit closer than the other 2 teams. They're a team that's making some moves this offseason, and I think they're not too far away from being able to really challenge for a playoff spot, especially considering the divisions that are likely going back to the way they were pre-pandemic for the upcoming season. I would think LA will actually likely stand a chance to get in, given that the division probably will be one of the weaker ones in the NHL. Then we only have the San Jose Sharks with a 2-year drought, which isn't really all that long, but of course I think that drought's going to likely get longer. This team is not in good shape. They have some albatross contracts, and it's just it's going to be a while, I think, before things get better. At least I would think there's some big deals there that are going to be almost impossible to get out of, and I'm not sure what Doug Wilson's going to do here, but I can see the Sharks continuing on this drought for a longer period of time than most of the teams on this list. Of course, that takes us to any other team would be at 1, which would be all the teams that missed the current playoff season. So obviously that's a list of 15 teams. So soon to be 16 as we get forward into the 32-team league next season. But certainly that's nothing too drastic. 10 years is the longest active playoff drought. But when it comes to winning a playoff series, that's a whole different story, a whole different beast here. Many teams have made the playoffs on occasion, but haven't won a playoff series in a long time. So let's take a look at the longest active playoff winless streak and currently active here in the NHL. The active drought streak for the longest time without a playoff series win belongs to the Florida Panthers, who have not won a series in 24 years, dating us back to 1996 when they went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals that season. They had an incredible run that year, and they have not done anything in the playoffs ever since when it comes to winning a series. They won a few games here and there, made the playoffs on numerous occasions, but never have won a playoff series in that long. So that is the current active longest drought here in the NHL. The next one belongs to the Toronto Maple Leafs, taking us back to the early 2000s when they were probably one of the most competitive points that we've seen in a long time, last winning a playoff series in 2004. So that's an awfully long time. I know in recent years here, the Leafs have been at that point where there's a lot of pressure to win after going through a rebuild and really building this team back up. And now they're at a new streak that they really don't want to be on here. Third longest drought right now is the Buffalo Sabres with 14 years without winning a playoff series. Of course, we mentioned they haven't made the playoffs in 10. Well, they haven't won a series in 14 years. There was a stretch there in the 90s when they were pretty competitive, especially during their time with some pretty fierce battles against teams like Ottawa and Toronto in that division. And really ever since then, it's really been a long uphill battle, as I mentioned. It seems like they've been rebuilding here forever. Next up, we have the New Jersey Devils, who have not won a playoff series in 9 years. They haven't made the playoffs in many of those years, of course, but it's been 9 years since they've won a playoff series. We have the Detroit Red Wings at 8 years. So, of course, the last few years they were making the playoffs in their long streak of making it. Obviously, they were not winning, so they were losing out in the first round. We have the LA Kings that are currently on a 7-year streak, taking us back to 2014 when they last won the Stanley Cup. They have not won a playoff series since that time. We also have the Minnesota Wild, who currently sit at 6 years, who have not won a playoff series since 2015. The Wild's been a team who have made the playoffs quite a bit of times. They're a pretty consistent team for the most part for long stretches here, but they just haven't had a lot of success when they get into the playoffs. So they're currently on a pretty good streak that way. Then we also have 4 other teams that have not won a playoff series since 2017, which include the New York Rangers, the Ottawa Senators, the Anaheim Ducks, as well as the Edmonton Oilers. So now that takes us to the next part, which is going to be a Stanley Cup Finals drought. Obviously, you can't win a playoff series if you don't make the playoffs. You can't get to the finals if you don't make the playoffs and win at least a few series. So now let's take a look at the longest active droughts for teams who have not shown up in the Stanley Cup Finals. The longest active team you can say now is the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have been waiting for 54 years, since 1967, since they last appeared in a Stanley Cup Final. And of course, that Stanley Cup Final, they were victorious. So 54 years is an awfully long time to keep this fan base going without a victory. Of course, we know what they've been through. We've talked about them a few times here on other droughts here in this video already, but the Leafs are a team that have a lot of streaks here that they're really looking to come to a close. Now, the next longest actually belongs to the Arizona Coyotes, and this is going to be combined with their original Winnipeg Jets history since the Jets moved to the Coyotes. Since the Winnipeg Jets moved to Arizona to become the Coyotes, those teams' history obviously is combined. They are considered one franchise. They're at 41 years now that the teams have never appeared in a Stanley Cup Final as long as either team has been a part of the National Hockey League. Next up, we have the New York Islanders, who have not appeared in the Stanley Cup Final since 1984. So that puts us now at 37 years. Obviously, it's been a long time since the Islanders had their dynasty, winning 4 consecutive Stanley Cups, and they have not been back to the Stanley Cup Finals ever since. And of course, as I mentioned, the Florida Panthers are a team that's never appeared in the Stanley Cup Finals since 1996. They had that one magical run, and really ever since, they have not really done much of anything when it comes to playoff hockey. So that's now sitting at 25 years. The Buffalo Sabres will now be sitting at 22 years, last appearing in the Stanley Cup Finals in 1999. Then that takes us to the Winnipeg Jets, who you would combine them with the original Atlanta Thrashers history, since that is technically one franchise. And combined, those two teams have now been in the NHL for 22 years with no Stanley Cup Final appearances. The Columbus Blue Jackets and Minnesota Wild are next. Both are in the NHL now for 21 years, and neither one of them have made it ever to the Stanley Cup Final. We got the Colorado Avalanche up next, last appearing in the Stanley Cup Finals in 2001, so now that streak is sitting at 20 consecutive years. Of course, the Avs are a team that look destined to break that sometime soon, given how strong they've been here the past few years. The Calgary Flames are up next, last appearing in the Stanley Cup Finals all the way back in 2004, where they lost against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But from 2004 till now puts that one at 17 years. Of course, the Carolina Hurricanes and Edmonton Oilers, neither of them have appeared in the Stanley Cup Finals since they played against each other all the way back in 2006. So it'll be 16 years and counting for those two franchises. And if you go back one further, the 07 final, which featured the Ottawa Senators against the Anaheim Ducks, neither team has been back to the Stanley Cup Finals since that time frame. So now we've gone through the playoff streaks, we've gone through winning in the playoffs, we've gone through making it to the finals, but which teams have gone the absolute longest here without taking home Lord Stanley's Cup? Well, there's no doubt you already know the answer here to the longest active streak, which is indeed the Toronto Maple Leafs, who last won the Stanley Cup all the way back in 1967. We're at 54 years and counting. Certainly a streak that I think for their fan base needs to end soon. It's certainly one of the longest active streaks in professional sports, and they are certainly in a predicament here with the current group of guys they have that I think the fan base and the organization and management, everybody expects them to be able to pull this off in the near future. Next, you have the Buffalo Sabres and the Vancouver Canucks. Both have been in the NHL now for a really long time. Neither one of them have ever won a Stanley Cup. Those two teams are probably further away than winning than the Toronto Maple Leafs, so clearly they will likely eventually have a chance to pass the Leaf streak if the Leafs can break it here sometime in the near future. Philadelphia Flyers have not won a Stanley Cup in 46 years, so that's certainly the next longest. That's also a pretty long streak here dating back to the 1970s. And you have the Arizona Coyotes combined with the original Winnipeg Jets history. Again, they have not appeared in the Stanley Cup Finals, and therefore you can't win a Stanley Cup if you're not in the finals. So that streak is the same as what we just discussed here. And of course, you have the New York Islanders, after winning their 4 consecutive Stanley Cups, have not been back to a final, so therefore they have not won since. That's approaching 40 years, certainly a long ways off. They've had some really close calls in the last couple of seasons, making it to the conference or semifinals, but unfortunately falling just a little bit short. And of course, you have the team at the Calgary Flames, who have not won since 1989, so now we can put them at 32 years. The Edmonton Oilers haven't won since 1990, so they're at 31 years. Then you have teams that are the next longest that have never won a Stanley Cup, including the San Jose Sharks, the Ottawa Senators, as well as the Florida Panthers. They all have 30, 29, and 28 years consecutive now being in the NHL with no Stanley Cup. So there's certainly lots of active droughts that can be broken. As you can see, that the parity in the NHL, the streaks for making the playoffs are not nearly as long as when it comes to winning a series or to making it to the finals or winning a Stanley Cup. They do have pretty good turnover from year to year when it comes to making the playoffs. So you don't see teams like that, going super long, except for a handful here that have been, going through a long rebuild. Otherwise, you get teams going in and out of the playoffs on a fairly consistent basis. But getting to that Stanley Cup final and winning the Stanley Cup is no easy task. Probably the most difficult trophy in pro sports to win, at least in my opinion. So let me know your thoughts on which teams you see breaking these droughts in the near future, and we'll discuss that down below in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.